So I'm going to quickly cover some of the features of Media Composer 7 and then also at the end talk about our AS11 implementation for Media Composer 7 as well. So Media Composer 7 is our release which we announced at NAB. It should be coming out towards the middle of June, towards the late end of June. So we're currently still in beta, which is what I'm running at the moment. It's an application, for those of you that aren't aware, it's 64-bit. It runs both on Mac and PC. It's a software-only application, but can run with hardware if your requirements need that as well. And that hardware can be either Avid hardware and also some of our third-party partners as well, which are Arja, Blackmagic, Matrox, to name a few. So we've been developing Media Composer obviously for a while. A lot of things have changed since we moved to 64-bit, and ongoing, a lot of things are changing as we go forward. Both Media Composer as a standalone application, and then also Media Composer, how it fits into the larger family of Interplay. And we'll talk about Interplay and Media Composer actually later on as well. So for this little bit of presentation, we're going to concentrate on Media Composer itself. So first of all, some of the new things which we implemented within the application is the ability now to add LUTs. I can just about hear a cheer somewhere. So Media Composer now will take, these are bespoke LUTs actually within the application itself, mainly because obviously we saw a huge uptake in the ARRI camera, which kind of pushed the technology for this as well. So you can take your sources, so these would be AMA-based sources, you can bring them into Media Composer, you can select one source or multiple sources, and you can add, at the moment, these are the default LUTs appearing in Media Composer as well. What we will be doing is allow you to implement your own LUTs as well through XML or CDL files as well. And then once you start working with this material, if you then transcode it, so you've got your, for example, your raw material that's coming off ARRI Alexa, you then transcode it, and then obviously that look or LUT will be applied to the media and placed onto your timeline as well. Now, those of you who are using Media Composer previous to version 7 will probably placing the effects on the timeline, and then a color effect across the top, and then doing the look for that. Obviously, that's still a valid workflow, but obviously if you changed or created a new sequence, you then have to copy and paste that effect and place it on the top of the timeline as well. So this is the true way which we were looking to implement it, is doing it as a source side effect. And you may remember we had color support for red files as well, so it's just an extension of that as well. So the way I got into that menu was to right-click and click on the source settings of that particular shot as well. What you also see in this actual source settings are also the frame flex tool as well. So what the frame flex tool allows you to do, this is also a new feature of Media Composer. If you have sources higher than HD, which we currently do, obviously a lot of customers are shooting material which is higher than HD. Now that material can come in a variety of different formats. Now Media Composer is still an HD application in terms of outputting. So Media Composer 7 can output files up to 1920 by 1080. However, with frame flex in this particular version, frame flex allows you to utilize the whole resolution of the image. So previously, for example, with a red file, when you brought in a red file, we would then squeeze that red file directly to 1920 by 1080. However, with frame flex, you can say keep the file its native resolution. I'm deciding this is my frame which I'm delivering, and out of that resolution higher than HD, this is the frame I'm actually delivering for that. So it's a little bit like pan and scan for video. This is a source side effect. It could also then be, when it's placed on the timeline, you could keyframe that as well. So we're utilizing all of the native resolution of your source clips to deliver for HD 1920 by 1080 as well. So we will be moving to, in the future, obviously having Media Composer outputting higher than HD as well. But in this particular version of Media Composer version 7, frame flex is a tool or an effect which allows you to natively use the full raster size of your source and delivering for HD frame size. And that's what frame flex allows you to do. So just so we're clear on that as well, there's a little bit of confusion on there. These are both source size effects, as I said. So in my source settings over here, I've got my color coding options, and then also, which is my drop-down menu for my LUT support, and then also I had my frame flex support as well within that particular application. Now, based also, sticking on the AMA side of things, what we've also allowed Media Composer to do as well is the ability to set up profiles now. Now, this is something called dynamic media folders. Now, what dynamic media folders allow you to do is that within Media Composer now, I can tell Media Composer to watch a certain folder. So what I've done, I've set up something over here. You can see it says profile. And this is probably the best feature of Media Composer 7 coming out, is that Media Composer can now be set up to watch folders. Now, based on that folder, I can then set up rules to say when you place media in this folder, that media being any AMA-based media, any QuickTime-based media, whatever that file-based media will be, when you place it into that folder, and that folder could be on your ISIS, it could be on your object matrix, it could be on a generic NAS, it could be anywhere on the network. When Media Composer is watching that folder, once media goes into it, Media Composer will then do this action, which I've asked it to do here. It will transcode it to DNX 120, for example. I could also then say, actually, I want you to transcode it to DNX 120, but I also want you to transcode it to DV25, for example, at the same time. So Media Composer now has a watch folder capability. It's something called dynamic media folders, where you can set up a Media Composer standalone to watch folders on your network, and as you place media into that folder, Media Composer will automatically do those features which you would do manually. So previously you'd go right-click AMA files, select all the files, right-click transcode, DNX 120, transcode it to workspace X, Y, and Z. So that's obviously a number of clicks. You can now automate that because whenever you place a clip into that folder, you can set up a profile and say, run this profile on that folder as well. The best thing about this is that once you shut Media Composer down, Media Composer is still monitoring those folders as well. So it's a background service which is doing that. And this tightly hooks into Interplay as well. If you had an asset management system, when you're transcoding files and place them onto the ISIS, they will also check into Interplay at the same time as well. So there are a couple of different profiles you can select here on dynamic media folders. I've got transcode. One workflow which we talked about, you have an After Effects person within the facility. The After Effects person is generating QuickTimes for the editor. Rather than the After Effects person exporting the file and the editor going finding it, you could tell the After Effects person to export to this particular folder, and every time the QuickTime goes into that folder, Media Composer will read that, generate a QuickTime, check it into the bin, and also put it onto the ISIS for you automatically as well. So that's one particular workflow. You have a couple of options. You have transcode, which is obviously taking a non-Avid file format, wrapping it as an MXF, and placing it in a codec of choice. You have copy to. So if I want to keep the file native AMA, but I want to copy it from that location and put it to this location and AMA link it, so that's a copy to function. And also we have consolidate. So if it's an XDCAM EX disk, you want to keep it XDCAM EX, you actually just want to consolidate it off the disk and put it onto the ISIS and then check it into Interplay, or just bring it into your bin as well. So dynamic media folders is a background watch folder technology allowing Media Composer to watch folders and trigger transactions based on those folders as well. So you can set up multiple folders at the same time. Sticking with the background transcode capability, what we also allowed within Media Composer, when you go into the transcode option, in this particular beta build, I don't have the option selected on there, but you'll have a third tick box here called transcode in the background. So Media Composer now, that foreground process, you can choose to push it to the back or actually bring it to the front as well. In terms of the performance of the system, it's going to perform, if you're transcoding from RED, for example, to MXF, and then you want to do a multi-camera edit, that's not physically going to be possible because you're utilizing the machine's processing power. So we don't have any performance metrics across that. Depending on what you're doing in terms of a transcode and what you want to do from an edit standpoint, will then have an impact of how much system performance you're going to get off the system at the same time as well. So a lot of those background capabilities of source-side color correction, source-side LUT support, frame flex, watch folder ingest, background transcode, a lot of the video tools which we put onto there as well. And then also I'm going to touch on some of the audio tools which we brought into, and then also the AS11 side of things as well. So the first thing we've enabled within the system is that when you go into your audio mixer tool, we now have something called a master fader. So this is taken straight out of Pro Tools. All of my audio faders now in Media Composer will always go through my master fader now. Previously, if you had a sequence and you wanted to place, for example, an effect on the whole sequence, you do a stereo mix down, and then you grab the gain and pull that down on the sequence, which was fine. But then if you amended the sequence, then you do another stereo mix down and again adjust the gain on that. Now, just like Pro Tools, these are all going through the master fader, and then anytime you want to place an effect on the whole timeline, you place it on this track here. At NAB, for example, we had the loudness plugin associated with it. So we had an RTAS loudness plugin through Isotope, and then we placed the loudness plugin on the master fader and then monitored the loudness of the sequence within Media Composer as well. So that kind of feature and functionality has come straight out of Pro Tools and pushing that into Media Composer at the same time. Finally, on the audio side of things, when you go into your clip gain, we now have clip-based gain and the ability to adjust clip-based gain directly within the timeline as well. So again, stolen from our Pro Tools partners over there. So again, just a quicker way for you to access your audio tools associated with that. And then finally, on the audio side of things, we now have cached waveforms. So on a per project by project basis, this is a new project. So when you actually hit the waveform at the initial point, we'll read the waveform, but the best thing is once we've read it, we actually cache it in the project now. So the second time I actually read this waveform, it's not going to redraw, it reads the cache file from directly within Media Composer. So again, I can kind of hear a rumble of applause there as well. Now moving on to the AS11 side of things. AS11 is something obviously we were looking to implement with Media Composer 7. It will be coming out with Media Composer 7. From the Media Composer application, there are a couple of ways to manage it. What we have in it with this particular version, I've got the ASO2 drop-down menu on here because AS11 will be coming in the next build. But directly from within Media Composer, you'll be able to export AS11 files, and also the track information and metadata from that can be amended as well. It's a generic export, so it's an AMA-esque export, and the reason why we say that is because AMA, traditionally everyone thinks about AMA being an ingest or an acquisition technology. This is an AMA export technology because when you export this AS11 or ASO2 volume, you can also AMA back to it as well. So we had AMA on the ingest side of things for you to acquire footage. We now have the AMA technology allow you to export your AS11 file directly from Media Composer onto the application as well. We've been working very closely with the, let's make this full screen. A person called Carl Perry and Avid is working very closely to establish our AS11 implementation as well. And these are some of the points which he talked to me last night about how we're looking to implement AS11. So we'll be within Media Composer 7. There are still a couple of things which we'll be refining as well in terms of information about the XML sidecar and how we were deploying that in ASO2 as well. There are a couple of things around about the SMPTE standard for the audio side of things, and once that's ratified with the actual SMPTE standards, we will then push that into Media Composer as well. We're working very closely with all of our partners, both from a Media Composer standpoint to the actual standard and also other partners here as well. There are ways of actually triggering, and in Media Composer we'll do some type of validation export as well. So for example, if you've actually exported your AS11 file and you've chosen a profile of such, and your Media Composer timeline does not represent that, Media Composer will then tell you that or bring up an error saying your profile does not match your current Media Composer setting as well. Typically AVC Intro 100 is obviously the delivery format as well. We will be implementing, if you are delivering for AVC Intro 100 within the Media Composer timeline, you don't have that, Media Composer will trigger a transcode, for example. One thing to be clear as well, when you're looking at kind of a large, broad range of AS11 export, this at the moment implementation is an editor by editor level. So if you're looking for a kind of managed export, i.e. a background service, that's not something which Media Composer allows you to do as well. You'd be looking at, for example, our partners here, Route 6, to deliver that file. This is an AS11 export for Media Composer 7. It's not an AS11 export for background interplay export or anything like that as well. While I did mention the background word there, so background transcode is in this version of Media Composer. We don't have background export or background rendering in this version of Media Composer coming out. It's something which is on the list, on the to-do list, amongst a lot of other things. But background transcode will be in Media Composer 7. Background export or background render will be coming in the future from that side as well. And that's my elevator pitch for Media Composer 7 and AS11.